Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Retro Select, a series of quick looks at retro games I feel like playing. Today's game is Solo Flight, which was originally released in 1983 for Atari 8-bit home computers and was developed by Sid Meier, who's best known for the Civilization series today. It was subsequently ported to a wide variety of different platforms though, including IBM PC, which is the version we're looking at today. And the reason we're looking at this version is that very recently, at the time of recording, MicroProse, or the new version of MicroProse as it may be, and whatever the entity calling itself Atari thinks it is this week, have recently re-released this on Steam. So this is a relatively rare example of a civilian flight simulator from the period rather than MicroProse's usual military fare. And it's a contemporary of Sublogic's Flight Simulator 2. Now, while Flight Simulator 2 took aim for complete realism and subsequently became Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is still around today of course, Solo Flight made a few allowances that made it a bit more of a video game. According to the Solo Flight manual, of which there's a PDF version included with the new Steam release, the game is based on the objectives set by the US Air Force when training pilots to fly the T-37 Tweet, and also loosely modelled on the aircraft of the late 1920s and 1930s, with specific reference being drawn from the Ryan ST series and the famous Spirit of St. Louis, which was flown across the Atlantic in 1927. And also, according to the manual, the simulation reduces slightly some of the more dangerous characteristics of the famous planes, as well as adding a few more instruments to aid flight and navigation. So don't expect a completely authentic experience from this, but it is still a worthwhile experience. So let's go play Solo Flight.
Okay, here we are with Solo Flight from MicroProse, recently re-released on Steam through a partnership between the resurrected MicroProse brand and Atari, of all people. This is not the best version of Solo Flight out there. If you want sort of the best Solo Flight experience, I would recommend grabbing the Atari 8-bit version, which is where it originated. That was the version that Sid Meier created in the first place. But this is what we got, and I thought it would be interesting to do a video of this recent re-release because this is potentially a means through which more people will discover this game. Although you have to be open to a certain amount of very datedness, because while the Atari 8-bit version had full colour, because it was a full colour system, the PCs of the time were running CGA, which was 4 colours. So this is an ugly game. I'm just warning you in advance. But it has plenty of value. So we'll go keyboard controls for now. And we'll start with flying practice in Kansas. See, we've got 6 different states that we can fly around. Oh, that's the demo. Flying practice, Kansas, clear weather. And you'll see if you choose flying practice in Kansas in clear weather, you will have this instructor helping you out. Who will basically talk you through the very simple circuit of the airfield you start at. So you see, it gives you some guidelines about staying at a good speed and a good altitude. Your high decrease throttle. So let's take that down to 50% throttle by tapping the 5 key. Turn left to 180 degrees, which is south, if you were not aware. There we are. Still a bit high, so let's decrease the throttle a bit more. Descend to 1500 feet. So we'll put the nose down a little bit as well as dropping off the throttle. So 1500 feet is basically going to look like about 2 o'clock on the altimeter. So coming up on that, sorry, 1:30 on the altimeter. Level off. Use the vertical speed indicator over on the right. Or the vertical velocity indicator, I think that is VVI. Turn left to 90 degrees, which is east. I'll talk through all these instruments when we've finished our training flight. You're at 1,575 feet, bearing 90. You're right on course. The white thing over there, that is a VOR tower, that's a navigation aid. We will talk more about those in a moment. But for now, let's just keep pootling along and enjoy the flight. So, some things you'll notice about Solo Flight in comparison to other civilian flight simulators, particularly Sublogic's Flight Simulator 2, which was a rough contemporary of this. This unfolds from a third-person perspective. So that's your plane in the middle of the screen. And that also means things like the horizon doesn't tilt and pitch. The plane moves around in the middle of the screen, which is obviously not as realistic as certain other flight simulators. But it does at least allow you to sort of focus on what's going on. You're low, pull back, you're too far right. Okay, so we need to pull over a little bit to the left. So we can just about see the runway up ahead. It's the black shape that you can see there. You're high, push forward. Let's drop off the throttle a fair bit as well. There's the runway. Just adjust our course nicely. Still too high. We're probably going to want to put the landing gear down in a moment. There's our shadow, so we're getting pretty low. We're on the glide slope. Give it some flaps to get that speed down. We're still too high. And pull back to flare. Butter the bread and all that. You've landed! Congratulations! Use your brakes. B. And there we are. You're ready to solo. Okay, so from here you can do what you want, basically. So start the engine again with 1. And that will just get us moving a bit. Maybe a little bit more throttle. There we go. Now we're moving. So let's just position ourselves nicely at the end of the runway. We'll turn round and we'll take off from there. So drop that throttle right back to 10%. Swing it round. And then hit the full throttle. Give it some flaps. Bring up the speed. And pull back. And off we go. Right, raise that landing gear. Put the flaps up. Get ourselves to a nice cruising altitude of about 2,000 feet should do it. Drop the throttle back. There we go, exactly 2,000 feet. Right, so what you can do in this free flight mode is just fly around wherever you want, really. There's not a lot to look at, as you can see, but there are various bits of scenery you can look at. So the white things here, these are the VOR towers. There's 2 of those in each state. And the way these work is that down in the lower left of your control panel, you can see a bearing and a distance. So the bearing is the direction from the VOR to you rather than from you to the VOR. So it's sort of the opposite of what you think. So you see, as we pass this one here, which is the bottom one, you see that'll flip all the way around to 180 in just a moment as we go past it. And so basically when that says 180, or nearest, damn it, anyway, that means that we are flying directly away from it. So the heading on the VOR now says 202, 203 and so on. So you have to imagine some sort of radial lines coming out from it, and you're sort of intersecting various different bearings on it. So now if we navigate to basically the inverse of that, so the inverse of, I don't know, you basically want to go in the opposite direction to what it's telling you, which is a little bit fiddly to work out. But in this weather you can do it by sight, of course. Oh, we're very high. I hadn't noticed quite how high we were. Should be paying attention to all this sort of thing. But anyway, that's basically how it works. And so, particularly when you are flying in conditions where you can't see what's going on, you need to make good use of those to figure out where you're supposed to be going. So what we have here, this sort of dotted area, I think this is supposed to be like a city or something. So if we drop our altitude down a lot. There we are. Okay, so you can see that's a sort of a wider urban area, if you will. Let's get our vertical speed back to level flight. And the black marks, those are airfields, as we've seen previously. So if we wanted to land at this one, in the current conditions we could do it visually, of course. So just line ourselves up the runway a little bit to the right. You might see in the marker that's to the left of the fuel gauge, that is the approach indicator. So using that you can see if you're on the glide slope, if you're too far left or too far right. Basically you want to keep the little plane icon in the middle of that. And if you do that, you're on a good approach. Yeah. Engine off, brakes on. Another successful flight. Alright, let's hit escape. Let's try something different. So let's go to Washington this time. And let's try night. So here's a map of Washington. We are starting at Portland, because that's where the little white dot is. And so you can see to our northwest, there's Kelso and Olympia. To our slight northeast, there's Seattle. And over to the east, there's... I can't read what that says. So, for example, let's try and reach Seattle. So we want to head a slightly northwest from where we start. Northeast from where we start. The runway is facing north, we can see from that map. But it is nighttime, so it's going to be tricky to see what's going on. lift off. Get that landing gear up. Get a bit of height going on. And just point ourselves slightly to the northeast. And then we wait. Now, the states in this are not to scale. So unlike Flight Simulator 2, which was to scale, you don't have to sort of fly for hours and hours and hours of real time to get between various different locations. Oh, hello. Yeah, so you see that there is sort of the effect of weather and wind and that sort of thing, which means that your plane doesn't necessarily always fly entirely straight and level all the time. It says there's no wind at the moment, but it felt like there was a little bit. Now, I guess that's Seattle up ahead. Those runways are certainly facing to the north. So if we ease off the throttle a little bit and start descending. But not too much. There we go. Should be a pretty nice approach. We're a bit high, I think. Let's put the gear down. The tricky thing with nighttime is you can't see a shadow. So you got to rely entirely on your instruments. And we're down. There we are. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. I do like that little map tracking your movements from one place to the other as well. Not sure what all this blobby stuff is over on the right. I assume that's supposed to be like mountains and stuff. So I guess black is where elevation is 0. So if you land at 0 feet there, that's what you get. But because Seattle is in that sort of pink and white spotted area, I think that means that it's a little bit higher than normal, going up to sort of the peaks on the white and turquoise segments there. Anyway, that is how the free flight mode or the flying practice mode works. The other feature in this game is the mail run game, which you need to access before the demo mode starts. So let's go to Kansas again. I'm going to play on private, which is a second difficulty up. We can see we're at Wichita at the minute. Hit the white dot there. Press escape. Enter mail carrier security code 8 followed by enter. Now this was the manual protection from the original. Now you can just press any old thing and just go in. So you can see here that we are currently in Wichita. We're playing on the private level. We've delivered 0 bags. Your aim is to deliver 5 bags as quickly as possible. We've got no fuel, we've got no weight, and we've got 0 points. So what we need to do is load up with mail first of all. So we press M to add a mail bag into our plane. And you see that adds a weight 250. We can add 2 of them. You can actually carry all 5 if you want, but that makes your plane very, very heavy. So you don't want to do that too much. Load up with fuel. And you'll see all the fuel increases the weight of your plane as well. And then you press escape to start flying. So we need to go to Emporia and Topeka. So if we press escape, it will show us the map again. So Emporia is to our northeast, and Topeka is north of that. So we can plot our route accordingly. Let's just go. Give it some welly on the throttle. And lift off the ground. Get that gear up. Ascend to a nice cruising altitude. So I think pretty much already we can see our first destination over here. So we actually don't even really need to climb that high for the minute. Because we're going to have to come almost straight back down again. So let's ease off that throttle, get the altitude back down again. So you can hopefully see what I mean by this, the fact that this is not realistically scaled at all. Now we've got a convenient northeast facing runway here. So we can just line ourselves up nicely for that. Get the gear down. There we go. Bring it down. Nice and gently. Flare. And cut the engine. Okay, landing points, rate 3, speed 64, points 820. So you get points according to how gentle and how fast your landing was. So that was a reasonable landing, I think. So we're now at Emporia. We now need to head to Topeka, which is almost directly north from where we are. We can load up with some more fuel and some more mail if we want to. So let's do that. And then Wichita, so we're just going to have to come back the way we came. That's fine. So escape to start flying. So north to Topeka, and then it's going to be southwest back to Wichita again. Right, not in an ideal position to take off here, so I'm going to do a little bit of manoeuvring on the ground. Just get back to the end of this runway. You'll notice the artificial horizon in the middle is actually more of a turn indicator than an actual artificial horizon. So it's closer in execution to what would be a turn and slip indicator in most light aircraft. But we won't hold that too much against it. Okay, swing it round. Because yes, we're obviously not banking there. And then full throttle. Lift off. And head to the north. And once again, we can see our destination almost immediately after getting airborne. So we do not need much in the way of altitude at all. Let's get just a little bit to the left. So that we're facing the runway at a good angle when we arrive. We're still ascending. Stop that. Too far right now. We're having to deal with the wind a little bit here as well. You see down at the bottom, the wind is blowing in a westerly direction at 4 knots. So it's not very strong wind, but it does mean that you'll feel the effect on your plane every so often. Like there, I didn't steer to the right there. It was the wind. So just flare for a nice gentle landing. Cut the engine and brake. There we go. Marvellous. Landing points rate 4, speed 58, points 840. Great stuff. So we need to head back to Wichita next. Unless we go to Salina first. I guess we could. Where is Salina? Salina is to the west of where we are now, and there is a convenient east-west runway. So I guess we do that. And then we head back to Wichita. Right. Have I got space to take off here? Probably not. However, if I point myself up this runway, then I will have. Alright, come on little plane, creep forwards. I really like this game, I don't know why. Because it's really simple, very primitive, and this sound, this PC speaker's sound is like a dentist drill in my ear, it really is. But I can't help but like this game. It's fun. I think to a certain extent it knows how unrealistic it is. But it's still enjoyable. And that's cool. I'm all about that. I am all about games that acknowledge their own limitations. And are still enjoyable as a result. Stop ascending. Oh. The cloud cover has descended slightly. Down to a ceiling of 3,750 feet now. With reduced visibility. It's okay, we can still see where we're going. I get a little hard to judge where that runway is though. There's that moment when it pops into full 3D like that when... A little bit low here. Let's put the wheels down. Cut the power. That's it. Just kiss the tarmac. Oh no! That actually made me jump. I guess I was going too fast on the ground when I tried to turn. Well, that is the end of our mail flight, I guess. Level private. Yeah, ground loop. So I was going too fast and I turned while I was on the ground and that caused the plane to flip over, basically. Whoops. Never mind. Well, I delivered 2 bags of mail successfully. Scored 5,015 points. My previous high score for this was 10,190, but that was on the easy level. So anyway, that is basically how Solo Flight works. There's those 2 different game modes you can play. There's the flight training mode where you can just experiment and fly around and see what you think. And then the mail pilot mode where you can crash. There are four levels of the mail pilot mode. On the highest difficulty level, you have to contend with quite frequently changing weather conditions and also emergencies on your plane as well. So your engine might fail or something else might break or your instruments might stop working or you might have to fly in completely reduced visibility flight relying entirely on your instruments. So lots of interesting things to do in this game. So despite the primitive technology, this is still worth playing because it's got all those flight simulator fundamentals down pretty well. But it's also done in a nicely accessible way. There's not very many keys you need to learn. It's very easy to learn how to fly this. So if you find something like Flight Simulator a little bit daunting, and I would not blame anyone for finding Flight Simulator very daunting, this is a good game to have a fiddle around with. Despite its horrible, putrid CGI graphics, the actual gameplay side of things is really solid and enjoyable. So if you have some means of trying Solo Flight, whether it's this version or the Atari 8-bit version or one of the various other ports that there were, I recommend giving it a go. It's a fun game. It's a fun game. So we'll leave that there for now. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.